Vasudevaya. A Saptaham is a reading of the Srimad Bhagavad Mahapurana in 7 days. This Purana takes in all the 10 incarnations of Lord Vishnu with accent on the 8th incarnation as Lord Krishna. The Purana especially depicts bhakti or devotion as being the greatest of all the Purusharthas. Here the reading has been done by Mukkannur Sri Hari Nambudiri and the explanation in English has been given by Mata Devi Vanamali. Shuklam Varadaram Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyaye Savravigno Vashantaye. I bow to Lord Ganesha, who is the remover of all obstacles in the reading of this Saptaham. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshal Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I bow to my Guru, Shri Jayendra Saraswati of Kanchi Kamakoti Pidam, and to Sri Shirdi Sai Baba, and to Sri Anyam Madhavan Nambudripad, and Sri Totam Krishna Nambudripad, who are my special gurus who introduced me to the Bhagavatam. We have managed to get a photo of Sri Anyam Nambudri, but unfortunately did not manage to get one of Sri Krishna Nambudri. However, they are both very dear to me because they are the ones who really introduced me to the Bhagavatam. I bow to all you great souls who have assembled here this afternoon, and you are all blessed souls indeed, because it is not very easy to be able to give one a chance to attend a Bhagavad Saptaham. Vyasa says, in the Vedas, the Ashwamedha Yaga is supposed to be one of the greatest yagas. But Vyasa says that one listening to the Bhagavad Purana or Bhagavad Saptaham is equivalent to 100 attendants of Ashwamedha Yaga. So we are indeed most fortunate. Not only that, the first Saptaham was held in a place called Shukratal, on the banks of the Bhagirathi River near Musavat Nagar. And to listen to a Bhagavad Saptaham on the banks of the Ganga is indeed most fortunate. And today we are here in this holy city of Rishikesh, which countless sages have trod on this in this holy land. And the banks of the Ganga. If the sun goes down a bit, we will lift up the curtains and you will have a remarkable view of the Ganga on both sides, flowing on both sides. So indeed, you're all most fortunate people, and I'm most happy to be able to speak to you this evening. And before we go into this, actually, I just wanted to give an introduction, because it's possible that not all of you here who have been to know anything about maybe you know something about Hinduism, but perhaps not too much. So I'll just touch upon the few main basic things about Hinduism. Hinduism is the most ancient religion on spirituality known to human being. That is why it is called Sanadhana. Sanadhana means ancient. It's called Sanadhana Dharma, the ancient way of living, ancient law of righteousness. Dharma means righteousness. And this dharma, there is a cosmic dharma which makes the planets go round, which makes the sun to shine, the rains to fall, the fruits to fall, and the flowers to bloom, and so on. This is a cosmic dharma which keeps the world together. Now, in as much as the human laws are only actually reflections or refractions of this law, And in as much as they embody these cosmic laws, we can have a really good government or a good. That's why Ramarajya, for instance, why is Ramarajya extolled? Because in that time, Sri Rama had the highest pinnacle of dharma. Dharma was there upheld at all costs. That is, even at the cost of his own happiness, he was ready to uphold dharma. So, as long as a human being upholds this cosmic dharma, we are able to have a good life. But the moment we go against this dharma, as we are doing now, only unhappiness can result from such a move. Now, our Sanatana Dharma, we don't have a man who started the whole thing, or like Christ or Muhammad or something like that. We have what we have called certain books known as Vedas. The Veda is the background or the foundation of the Sanatana Dharma. Now the Veda, nobody knows how and when it came to being. What we say is that it has always existed, because Veda comes from the word vid, to know. So knowledge has always existed. And this Veda, in the form of sound waves, vibrations, has always existed in the cosmos. Everything has sound waves, all the planets emit sound waves. For instance, it was Vishwamitra who found out that the sun itself emits the sound known as So the sages of the Vedas are known as rishis. And they never claimed authorship for the Vedas. They never said, I have written the Vedas. Because nobody can say that. Nowadays, if we do anything at all, we have to put a signature at the end that who made this and who did this and so on. But they never claimed anything as their own. They only said they were the seers or the hearers of the Vedic sound. That's why it's called a Shruti, that which one hears. So they heard these sounds in a super state of consciousness. They heard these sounds, which are ever existing in the ethosphere. So that Veda is the basis of the Sanatana Dharma. Now it happened that the very great sage, who was also a rishi really, he is called Vyasa. Vyasa is the one, because the Veda was so vast, it was impossible for anyone to totally memorize it all. So what he did, because people's memories are getting poorer and poorer, even at that time, mind you, so look, you can imagine how we are now. So even at that time, he thought memories were poor. So Vyasa divided into this huge amount of knowledge, he divided into 4. And that is now known as Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Samaveda, and Atharvana Veda. And he gave it to each of his disciples, so they need to memorize only one portion of that Veda. So that's why he is known as Veda Vyasa. Now the Vedas are very, they're written, the language very abstruse and not easily understandable by the common man who cannot understand abstractions. So what he did was to bring these Vedic truths down to the level of the common man's understanding by writing 18 Puranas. He was a very prolific writer. He wrote the 18 Puranas, and not content with that, he wrote a huge voluminous text called the Mahabharata, which contains just about everything that anyone can ever think about. Now, even that was not enough for him, and it was later that we will take that story, particular story, which Swamiji actually mentioned today. That story about how Vyasa wrote the Bhagavad Purana will be taken tomorrow. But the fact is that he wrote the Bhagavad Purana, which was his last work, because with that he felt completely satisfied. He was very happy. Now, that's enough of writing for me, he said. So then this Bhagavad Purana, what is the particularity about Bhagavad Purana, which is not found in the Vedas and all the other Mahabharata and so on? The fact is, in the Bhagavad Purana has intense emotion of bhakti or love. Bhakti is love towards the God. Now, in Hinduism, we have Sanskrit has many words for love. In English, you just say love, 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 love. But in Sanskrit, love for different people are different names. And love for God is known as bhakti. So this Bhagavad Purana is infused and imbued with this love, overflowing love for God in the shape of Lord Krishna. So that is why what is a particularity about the Bhagavad Purana above all other Puranas. Now let us think about, we are holding this a Saptaham. This is called a Bhagavad Saptaham. What on earth is a Saptaham? Most of you, I'm sure, some of you must have gone to many Saptahams, I'm sure. But to many of you, this must be a very new word. What is a Saptaham? Saptaham only means 7 days. It's not such a very great word or anything. It just means 7 days. Sapta means, in Sanskrit, it means 7. Just like 7 in English comes from this Sanskrit root. Set in French, for instance, comes from this root. Sieben in German comes from this root. So because Sanskrit is the mother of all languages, you will find Sanskrit words has crept into all other languages, and even though they may deny it, the fact is that it is there. Sanskrit is the mother of all languages, and you will find Sanskrit in all other languages. So, Saptaham means 7 days. Now, this is not only, it's a Bhagavad Saptaha Jnana Yajna, to give it its full name. Just to make it sound very important, we give it the full name. Saptaha Jnana Yajna. So 7 days in which you are kind of nourished by jnana or knowledge. And yajna is a kind of a fire ceremony. Now all of you came for the fire ceremony this morning. That's a yajna. A yajna is a fire ceremony in which we invoke some god in the fire in order to get some benefit for us. Today we had invoked Lord Ganesha, begging him to see that everything goes smoothly and there's no obstructions. So everything has a motive behind it, of course. It's not totally motiveless. So then, this is a yajna. Now Saptaha, let's come back to Saptaham again. The Saptaha means 7 days of listening to this reading and narration of this Bhagavad Purana. Now, normally speaking, actually the whole of this Bhagavad Purana, as I said, it gives you knowledge and the knowledge of who you are. Who am I? It's $1 million question. Who am I? We don't know, really speaking, who we are. So this gives that knowledge. So then, but normally if you tell, even though we all long for truth, the fact that we're a bit frightened of truth, the brutal truth we deny, we'll say. Because we don't want to be faced with what we really are. We like to make ourselves look pretty and look, totally different from what we really are. So that truth we don't really like to face. So Vyasa was very clever. He knew that if he tells everybody, come on, 7 days you're going to sit and meditate on truth, every chair here will be empty. So then he had this clever idea. He covered that truth with beautiful stories. And Vyasa said, a story has a strange ability to worm its way into everybody's heart. Everybody loves to listen to a story, not only children, everybody loves a story. And he says, anyone who has listened to a story, after listening to that story, he will never be the same again. Because the story works in some way to change his entire attitude to life. And these are not ordinary stories. These stories are filled with the love of the divine, flowing through the melodious flute of Lord Krishna. And it just drenches us with his love. So naturally, these stories are filled with Jnana, Vairagya and Bhakti. So these stories are something so important that without knowing, like we have sugar-coated pills. Nowadays we get all the, before, in medicines and medicine, all was crushed like that and you had to somehow manage to swallow it. When the child, you'll put a bit of sugar also. But now they're very clever. They sugar-coat the pill in different colors also if you want. Blue, white, green, yellow, whatever you want. Nice little set of tablets. Some people have the entire breakfast consists of tablets. So then they have, this sugar-coated pills are very easy to swallow. So Vyasa, this is very cleverly, he quoted this truth, the glaring truth of who we are, with beautiful stories, embellished it with beautiful stories, so that we could enjoy these 7 days without any much of a problem. So this is a Bhagavad Saptah. Now, the Bhagavatam is filled with this, not only stories, but the incarnations of Vishnu. Now, Hinduism has its amazing flair for personification of abstract truths. They personify these truths. So the Trinity in Hinduism is known as Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. So Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the one who maintains the world order. Maintenance crew, maintenance crew is by Vishnu. And the destruction part of it is Shiva. Now, because he has a work of maintenance of the world order, he's a lot of work, much more than the other two. The other one had just to create and leave it, let them muddle along as much as they like. And Shiva has only take up, when the time is over, take them off. But Vishnu has to see that we all are living in a fairly, decent fashion. So because of this, it's Vishnu who takes many avatars or incarnations whenever that dharma falls from its. That's why in the Bhagavad Gita he says, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bharata abhyuttanam dharmasya tadatmam sujamyaham. I will incarnate myself from age to age, O Arjuna, whenever dharma falls and whenever there is a necessity to uplift that dharma. So that is why he has taken on many incarnations. Now the Bhagavad Purana is filled with stories. First of all, how many incarnations has he taken? The Bhagavad Purana itself, it's easier to count the grains of sand on a beach than to count the number of incarnations that I have taken, he said. But of course, since we can't go through the whole lot, they concentrate on 10 main incarnations in the Bhagavad Purana with emphasis on his 8th incarnation as Krishna. So the whole of Bhagavad Purana, there are 12 skandhas or 12 books. Out of that, the whole entire 10th and the 11th are completely devoted to the life of Lord Krishna, because he is the supreme incarnation, as the Bhagavad Purana itself says, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. He is the total or complete incarnation of God. All the others are only amshavadaras or partial incarnations. So his life is brought out in full force at that time. So now we know what is a Saptaha, and this is also a kind of tapas. Now let's find out what is this tapas. Tapas in olden days means some sort of mortification of the flesh by which you could attain God. Some people would lie happily on a bed of nails. I don't know, not too happily maybe. Some people would, stand on their heads or not eat, and all sorts of weird things they would do in order to find God, to find the truth. But again, here, as it is said, this tapas is a very easy and sweet tapas, because it only means sitting for some time, listening to these wonderful stories of the God of love, because Krishna is indeed the incarnation of the God of love. It is said that when he appeared before the gopis, Manmada himself was very jealous because he appeared so much more beautiful and more loving than he. Manmada is a god of love, by the way, Cupid. So he himself was overcome by the beauty and the greatness of Lord Krishna. So this is the Bhagavad Purana plays accent on the Krishnavattara. So, but here again, the way that we are doing it is entirely a different way to how it is done in North India. In North India, it's something called like a Harikatha system. That is, mainly they will sing the stories, and then they will sing and they will dance, and more accent again only on Krishna Avatara. In Kerala, only in Kerala, it is done in this way. That is, the reading of the actual verses of the Bhagavad Purana. There is a lot to be gained from the reading of these verses. The Sanskrit verses are all mantras in their own. You might think, though, it's not necessary really to listen, and very often you'll find when people, half the hall will go and get up and go when the reading of the verses are. But this is not the correct way to do this. That reading of the verses alone has an amazing ability to arouse our inherent spiritual tendencies. As an example, I would say, when my son was only 4 years old, I would drag him and take him to all these saptahams by Anyam and Thotam and all that. At those times, there were the only two in the Kerala screen, shall I say. And he would go to sleep on my lap. But obviously, the child had imbibed a lot, knowingly or unknowingly, he had imbibed a lot, because today he's so interested in that Bhagavad. So without knowing, if you can imbibe that much, how much more can you, who are full of attention, I know, I'm sure you will all be listening with great attention, how much more will you be able to listen? So the stotra, or the not only the narrator, but the listener is of great importance, very, very great importance. That is, actually the Bhagavad Purana itself says there are only two types of listeners. The bhavakas and the rasikas. There are two types, the bhavakas and the rasikas. Bhavaka is one who has the bhavana, or the attitude of you want to listen, and you are the desire to listen and hear and get something out of it. And the rasikas are those who enjoy. Not only that you listen and want to get something out of it, but you actually enjoy the whole thing. You just love to listen to that whole story. That is why it's a Rasika. Bhavaga is what the first stotram of the Bhagavad Purana says. So there are two types of listeners, these Bhavakas and the Rasikas. And I hope you will all become both, not just one or the other, but both. And also now there are many, few, rules about listening. For instance, we always say, Jitasana, Jitendriya, and so on. Jitasana means one who, you must make up your mind from the beginning itself. I shall sit without fiddling and fidgeting and going to sleep and feeling bored, because I would love to hear this, and I shall, a kind of a vow to oneself. Because otherwise it's very easy, to give up and go, and just okay, let me go for a round after all. I'll go and watch the Ganga, or I'll watch something else, because even now, the holy thing is going on. So, that is a jitasana. So you are determined that you will remain in your seat for the whole of this thing. Jitendriya means you're in control of your senses. How do you control these senses? Senses can be controlled by not meddling with other things. If you're constantly looking, tuk, WhatsApp messages and other things, that's why we advise you not to bother about. Nothing is going to happen to the world if you drop out of it for 1 week. It will continue as it was ever before. So you either leave your phones, use it in the night or something. And again, there's another thing. All these messages you get from there, or you're watching the TV. As soon as you go to your room, click on the TV and say, what's happening in the world now today? Nothing at all. Don't worry. The same old thing which has happened before. So, if you want to be Jitendriya, control of the senses, you cannot control if you're constantly agitated by what is happening in the world, agitated by what's happening in your family. All this is being taken care of for you. Don't worry. Leave it at the feet of the God. Let it happen. Whatever happens, it's His wish. And He will see to it. Just pray to Him that I will be allowed to sit through the whole thing without fatigue, with interest, with attention, and with joy. That's very important. Many people feel that, religion should be, if you are a religious person, you should wear a very gloomy look and never smile and very serious and so on. Especially in Christianity, it's very prevalent. But Hinduism is joyous religion. In fact, Krishna is a God of joy. Who ever heard of a God who is always dancing and singing? Only Krishna does this, dancing and singing and playing the flute. He's ever ready to enter into anything. He's one of the most joyous gods. And here we are talking about Him. So you should be joyous in bliss every moment. So make up your mind. This is how you're going to listen to this. These are the few tips on how to listen to the Bhagavatam. Because unless you yourself have that attitude and make up your own mind, I am going to do this and I'm going to enjoy it. Unless you make up your mind, then it's very difficult, because mind is really the controller of your body. And even if you have aches and pains, all of us have aches and pains, no doubt. But if the mind decides, no, that is nothing at all, I am not the body, I am that eternal immortal spirit, and I shall have nothing, let the body do what it likes, I shall sit and enjoy it. Actually, so you see that the Bhagavatam actually tells you that of that infinite spirit which has pervades the entire universe, entire cosmos, as that prana or life force, and in the human being as the Atma. In his participation of his race, a marathon race, where? To himself. It is a race where the runner, the race, the road, and the goal are he and he alone. So actually speaking, the race is from here to here. It only appears to be going through a there, which is also in actual fact is here. Because there is no race. It is when we are talking about spirit which is timeless, spaceless spirit. So where should he go? Where should he come? It is always here and now. So in that marathon race, that can never, it will only end when that spirit reaches the ocean of bliss. The river will keep on flowing and flowing until it reaches the ocean of bliss, which is God. So Hinduism says that it may not take place in one lifetime, but then never mind. Take as many lives. The important fact is that no one is ever condemned. No one is ever thrown into eternal damnation or eternal hell. There's chance after chance after chance is given to you. You can be born 1,000 million, 100,000 million times. Yet, as I said, the race will never end until the river reaches the ocean of bliss, which is God. So then all these actually in this race, as I said, our lives are like milestones on the way. And all the bodies which we inhabit are the traveling houses, travelers' bungalows. In olden days, there's travelers' bungalows we had. When we went somewhere, you will go and stay in a nowadays we have 5-star hotels, but olden days are travelers' bungalows. So these are the travelers' bungalows, which all the bodies which we have taken. And this body is also one of the bungalows we are staying in. We don't know when it might fall. No, not fall, when we might be asked to quit. If we can't pay the rent anymore, you'll be thrown out without any compunction. So this is the, as I said, this is the realization that you get by listening and hearing the Bhagavad Purana, that life is actually a play for us to enjoy. You can enjoy, if you know who you really are, you can enjoy that drama without getting involved in it as we do. Have you seen a lizard? Lizard's tail drops out. Somebody does lizard, and the lizard can watch happily as the tail dances around. Tuk 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 tuk, the tail would dance. Similarly, the human being can watch its own tail dance around if he knows exactly who he is. I am a good lizard. I can stand on the roof without falling. Let my tail dance around in the world outside. I don't care. So this is the idea or the knowledge which this Bhagavad Purana tries to give us. So, and in this today we are doing what is the Mahatmyam, or what do we, some of the important saptahams which have taken place, and what is the what is the gain to be got out of it. And this Mahatmyam is taken from the Padma Purana, of two stories of the personification again of Bhakti, Jnana and Vairagya, and another story of the Brahmin called Atmadeva. The very first, the opening actually of the Bhagavatam is set in a forest of Naimisharanya, where the Suda called Suda's name was Ucheshravas. Ucheshravas was being questioned by the Shaunaka and the other munis as to, explain how the differences in all the stories of the Bhagavad Purana. Now, Ugrashravas was present when the very first Saptaham took place, when Sri Shuka explained the Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. So his name, now, olden days, the names they are given have a very special meaning. Ugrashravas means one who listens very, very, very carefully. So he never missed a word. He knew everything. He not exactly as it was said. Because in those days we had no books. Everyone had to be an Ugrashravas if they wanted to capture the meaning of any book or remember any book. So these, in olden days, the meanings of names, we used to give very nice meanings to our children, the names of gods and so on. Nowadays, of course, people always call Kintu, Rintu, Mintu, Chintu, and names like that, which have absolutely no value either to children or to the parents who call them. When you call a child the name of a god or some beautiful idea with an idea, it's a mantra. So you not only you are, when you're calling it, you are hearing it. The child hears it, and it helps him in the growth, spiritual growth, and your own growth. And not only that, it helps the growth of all the plant life and things around, because the mantras are vibrations which go and help the growth of even the plant life. So that is the reason why in olden days we always gave names of gods to children. So now this thing is being related by this person. And today actually we are very the first today we are very fortunate because we are also starting this Saptaham on a very auspicious day. It's the full moon day of the month of Phalguni. And it is, as Swamiji said, it is the birth date of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, one of the greatest devotees of Lord Krishna. And not only that, today is what we call Uttara Phalguni, where the Holika, or the demoness called Holika, is being, in fact, even now, just now, I think she's being burnt down below. And in a very few more minutes, we take away the curtains are drawn, you will see the full moon rising there. Now, in the very first Saptaham, the chief, Sri Shuka himself, Sri Shuka Brahmarshi himself, was the narrator, and the chief listener was Parikshit Maharaj. Today also our chief narrator is actually, the reader is the Sri Hari Nambudiri from the chief priest, who was the chief priest of the famous temple of Guruvayur. We are very fortunate in having got him. And his assistant is also known as Unnikrishnan, another beautiful word, a small baby Krishna is called. He's not too much of a baby now, but still, he is his name is still Krishna. So we are very fortunate. And our chief listener today we have is Datin Leela Menon, who is celebrating her 88th birthday. And also Raji Menon, who is celebrating her 80th birthday. So we are all, these are the, usually you have a narrator and a chief listener. So we have the good fortune of having. And another strange thing that tomorrow the nakshatra is Hasta, or the star under which Datin Leela Menon was born. So that is again a very fortunate thing. So we have, indeed, it just happened. We did not really have much to do with choosing. Everything was chosen for us by Lord Krishna himself. So we are in this wonderful day also, wonderful time also. So then we are coming to this, I said, the stage setting is actually in this forest of Naimisharanya, and there this yoga is describing how the first person we meet is Narada. Now Narada, what it means is actually he is a person who can take us to God. In all the different stories about you will find that he is the one actually who activates and encourages people in different devious methods sometimes, but still he is the one who leads us to God. Now Narada was another fact about him is he could go anywhere. He was a denizen of heaven, but he had the ability to go anywhere he liked. He can go from heaven to hell, from Kamsa to Krishna, from all the other worlds. He can come to this world, to any world he wants. He would go everywhere strumming his lute and saying Narayana, Narayana, he'll go everywhere. That was the only method he had of teaching people to love God, was the name of God. So one day it is said, Narada decided he'll come to this plane of existence, this planet, just to see what's happening around here. So he came and he said he was horrified to find the decadence existing when? 5,000 years ago. So you can imagine what his feelings will be like if he came now. He said it is terrible. He said how people are only interested in money, and if you have money, you can be considered erudite. Yes, if you have money, you can get some, become a pandit. Panditji, the word Panditji can be put if you have enough money to get. You don't really have to have knowledge. He said ashramas will be filled with foreigners and who will take away our cultures. Exactly what's happening now. I didn't say this. Through Narada's mouth is ashramas filled with yavanas. The word he uses is yavana. What is a yavana? Is one who does not understand the Vedas, who does not follow the Vedas. And that means foreigners, Westerners. So it's happening today. Almost all our ashrams have heads, Western gurus nowadays. Flooding, the Rishikesh is flooded with Western gurus. One goes and another comes. Muji has just gone and Prem Baba has just come, I think. Anyway, so this goes on. So this, amazing how this book written 5,000 years ago, even at the end of the book, the description of Kali Yuga is given, in which exactly what's going on here is mentioned, very clearly how things are happening. So now to come back to Narada. Narada was very unhappy to see this decadence going on. At last he came to Vrindavan. He went to Vrindavan and said, at least here maybe, where Krishna is going to take birth, let me see if it is what is happening here. And there he saw a very strange sight. One beautiful woman was standing around, looking rather sad, with two very old men beside her. Two old men and one beautiful woman. And he asked her, who you are? And she said, I'm the personification of Bhakti. And these two are my sons, Jnana and Vairagya. Just imagine, this is what happens now. Mothers and grandmothers look much older, much younger than their sons. Mothers and grandmothers dye their hair, put false teeth, makeup, facelift, and so on, and they look so young. And the poor sons, they don't dye their hair, and they look grey and rather sad and haggard. So we don't know. This happened then, long ago. Bhakti was looking extremely nice and flourishing, and poor Jnana and Vairagya, old and decrepit and standing beside her. So he asked, Narada asked, what is this? What's happening around here? Why are you like this? Who are you? And why are your sons looking like this? Just imagine now, let us exactly what's happening now. See, Narada, who's the proponent of Bhakti, he is the one who wrote Bhakti Sutras. Even then he said, Bhakti without Jnana and Vairagya is useless. What is happening today? All the Semitic religions have great Bhakti. Lot of Bhakti seems to be, every temple is filled with devotees. All the people are going there and doing offerings and so on and so forth. For what? The pujari may benefit. But neither the person who is giving or it's a kind of a barter. They give something to God and they expect something from God. So there's no real bhakti in any of these temples. And what about the Semitic religions, as I said? They have great bhakti. They are prepared to die for their God. What about these suicide bombers? They're prepared to die for their God. But their bhakti has led to fundamentalism. Why? Because they have neither jnana nor vairagya. No jnana, no vairagya. That means they have no knowledge of that Godhead to whom they are offering worship. They consider that to be some sort of a person living up there in heaven. They say that Hinduism is idolatrous. I say that the Semitic religion is idolatrous because they say that only one idol which they worship is the right idol. They are making that formless one into one form, one miserable little form which they say alone is the right form, and therefore everybody should. What is that except idolatry? Whereas we say that that which is formless can take on infinite forms. There is no dearth to his forms. You see him everywhere, anywhere, everywhere. There's a beautiful story of Krishna and Arjuna. Krishna takes Arjuna and shows him a tree. And says, Arjuna, what do you see there? Arjuna said, I see lots of mangoes. So Krishna said, look again. So Arjuna looked and he saw all Krishnas hanging from a tree of Krishna. Thousands of Krishnas hanging from a tree. So it was a very salutary lesson to Arjuna that everything is Krishnamayam, nothing is there which is not Krishna. So that is the way we look at the world. So here you find bhakti is very great in the Semitic religion, very great. None of us are prepared to die for our God. They are prepared to die for their God, for nothing and for no reason. They get nothing out of it, really speaking. Yet, because they get no fame, nobody bothers with this thing. Yet, they are prepared to die for that God. So, bhakti has become prosperous and fat and sleek now, but jnana and vairagya have become old and decrepit. So, in that time itself, Narada says this. Bhakti without jnana and vairagya, useless bhakti, useless. So then he consults with the Sanatkumaras and they say the only way to bring back jnana and vairagya is to hold the Bhagavad Saptaham. So he goes to Haridwar. Actually, he holds that first Saptaha in Haridwar, on the banks of the Ganga. And at the end of that Saptaham, you see Bhakti coming in, all beautiful, and two young men beside her, Jnana and Vairagya. And she bows to Narada and thanks him for having brought. And he says, don't worry, in future I will put all of you into this book, so that those who read this book will have both Bhakti, Jnana and Vairagya. So the book is filled with us, not just Bhakti alone, but together with Jnana and Vairagya. So that is the first story, Mahatmyam of the Bhagavad Purana. which shows us how bhakti without jnana and vairagya is not really bhakti. And Narada, who's a proponent of the bhakti cult, he himself says that. Without jnana and vairagya, bhakti is useless. So then we come to the second story, which has not been read, but it's a very interesting story. So we'll have that. It comes in the Padma Purana in this thing. In ancient days, on the banks of the Tungabhadra, there was a beautiful village, and there lived a Brahmin there called Atmadeva. Now, Atmadeva had a wife called Dundukari. Now, Dundukari, Atmadeva was very, pious and filled with bhakti and did all the things which normally Brahmin should do. But Dundukari was a woman of a vain and frivolous disposition. She just tolerated husband's nonsense and went along with him somehow. So, but they had this, Brahmin had one problem. They did not have any children. So he's very anxious to get a child. So he's always grieving. So one day he was walking around in the forest and there he saw a sadhu, a sannyasi. And the sannyasi knew what he was. Before Atmadeva could open his mouth as a sannyasi, he says, I know what you're going to ask me, but that you want a child. But let me warn you one thing. You are not fated to have a child for the next 7 births. So he said, but I tell you, I will instruct you on the bliss you can get out of Atmic knowledge. So Atmadeva said, this bliss cannot be compared to dandling my little child on my knee and saying choo 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 and so on to him. So lovely to see him smile and hug me. And what Atmic bliss I do? Go and tell it to somebody else, not me. I want a child, he said. So then the sannyasi thought, well, he's fated for this. And normally all those sadhus in those days they had a good store of mangoes in their hand. So he took out one mango and gave it to him and said, here's a mango. You go give it to your wife. Ask her to eat it, but she will definitely conceive. But tell her one thing, she has to restrain her other frivolous activities. She has to be very, she has to have disciplined life. Then she will get a very good child. So Atmadeva was very happy and went back and gave it to his dear wife, Dundukari. Dundukari, when she heard this, she was very, very upset. She was a very modern woman. Many modern women don't want to have babies at all. She had a very slim and very good figure, and she thought to herself, oh my God, if I get pregnant, what will I be? I'll be like a little barrel. And then 10 months of this horrible carrying this child around, and after that, think of what I have to undergo. The child will be crying in the night, I'll have to get up in the night, I'll have to do this. She didn't want this one little bit. She preferred her beautiful figure. Nowadays, they say, modern, both the couples are working. They have dual income, no kids. So that's the motto. So she said, but what could she do? Her husband was quite determined. So she said, all right. Then she was sitting and grieving. Oh my God, she said to herself, I really wish I didn't have to go through this. At that time, her sister came. Her sister said, don't you worry. I'm expecting and I'll do one thing. I will, as soon as I deliver, I will give you that. Your husband is always going around, saying some stories and all that. So he won't even notice this. As soon as I deliver, I will give you that baby. Okay? But only condition she had was, you must give some money to my husband. That's all she bothered about. She was willing to sell her child for the sake of a few rupees. So you give him to that, and I will do that. All the rest, leave it to me. So then Dundukari was very happy about it, and then they said, let us test the efficacy of this mango. Is this man really, So they gave it to the cow. Told the cow to eat the mango. Now the cow also became pregnant. Now, when the sister delivered, surreptitiously she came and put. Then, when the husband Atmadeva was so happy, oh my, he's got a son, a lovely son. So then he said, the wife said, you know, I don't have any milk. So, but my sister has a stillborn child, so she's got plenty of milk in her breast. Can she come and give the baby milk? So that was all very good, well arranged. Everything was well arranged. And very soon the cow also delivered. The cow delivered a beautiful baby boy, but only thing he had ears of a cow. So he was called Gokarna. Gokarna, the ears of a cow. But he was a lovely child and grew up to be a very, very full of sattvic child he was. This Dundukari's son was called Dunduli, because after his mother, poor Atmadeva, so in love with her, so why he called her Dunduli. So this one was a terrible terror. He became from bad to worse. He was, he would go and rob people, and eventually he was always demanding money from his parents. Eventually these people had no money even to give them, and then he threatened to kill them, and he took away the plates and all the vessels and so on, which his mother possessed. Then the father was so upset. So at that time, Gokarna, on the other hand, was a wonderful boy. So Gokarna went and told this Atmadeva, don't stand around here and get all this thing from this boy. Why don't you? You're already old. Why don't you go to Kashi or some other place, or Rishikesh or Haridwar, and spend the rest of your life over there? And that is better. So Atmadeva took the advice, and off he went. And here this Dundukari started, he brought prostitutes to the house, and he told his mother, grabbed all her wealth. She was only attached to her wealth and her necklaces and her clothes and so on. He took it all away from her, and in sheer despair, she was so unhappy about it that she threw herself into a well. And then this man started off his terrible, he started even stealing in order to keep up the prostitutes he had brought to the house. So then when he started to steal, these women felt, oh my God, now the king will be after him and they will catch us, and that'll be. So they decided to kill this chap, because already they've got a lot of money from him. What use of this stupid chap? So they hung him up from this thing, put live coals in his mouth and killed him somehow or other, and off they went. Now, naturally, in having such a horrible life and horrible death, he became a Mahapredam, what you call a terrible ghost. He was always, in that. And Gokarna, in the meantime, he had also left the place and he was going round. He heard of his brother's death and terrible mayhem. And he did, Prithir Samskaras for him in Gaya, Kashi, and all the places which they normally do. But then when he returned, he wanted to stay in his house. But this ghost never allowed him to sleep for 1 minute. Constantly, the dung, 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 something falling and some noises here. So he didn't know. And so he asked, who are you? What are you? What do you want? Then the ghost couldn't speak. So he took Ganga Jal and threw it and said, tell me who you are. So he said, I'm your brother, unfortunate brother, who, even though I was born a Brahmin, have been in such a terrible state that I have become this ghost. Please, somehow save me. So Gokarna said, I have done kriyas for you in Gaya and so many other places. But this ghost said, obviously that's not helping at all. Now what should I do? So then he prayed to the sun god, and he was told that do a saptaham for him, a Bhagavad saptaham. That's the only way that this ghost will be. Even the most wickedest of people, if they listen to her with Shraddha and faith, Jitasana, Jitendriya, and Bhavaka, Rasika, all, if you listen, even a ghost will get redemption. So he started this Bhagavad Saptaha in the banks of the Haridwar, I think, Haridwar. And then in that place, the ghost wanted to come, but ghost cannot stay in one place. So he put a bamboo into which the ghost entered. The bamboo had 7, cuts again. And each day, at the end of the sun, tuck, one of these things would burst open. And then every day, 7th day, when the 7th day came, the ghost was released and he came out in a divine form and fell at his brother's feet and thanked him for having somehow delivered him from this terrible existence. So then the question was asked, how is it that this ghost, who was a terrible fellow, he had been haunting and doing things to people. How is it Gokarna was such a lovely boy, and so many others were listening. How is it they also did not get redemption? So it is said that the listeners, they have a quality that nobody listened like the ghost. Without food, drink, nothing, he was totally engrossed. His whole mind was fixed on that story of the Bhagavatam, and with great attention, his whole heart, he was so obsessed by this. Nobody in that audience listened, not even Gokarna was to listen to such an extent. That's why the ghost got redemption first, and only later it is said, of course, that Gokarna also got redemption. So these are 2 stories in the Mahatmyam which may encourage you to listen with great faith. We're not going to put you in a bamboo thing. However, even without that, hopefully all of you will listen with faith and attention. And this is the end of the Mahatmyam, and tomorrow we will start the actual Bhagavata Purana.